Hello, welcome to Seaver's Clan. Uh, Actually, I got to do something before we get started because y'all need to be able to see what we're doing. Sorry about that.
There we go.
This is kind of new, so we're experimenting with this. We wanted to show y'all guys um, while we're studying. We figured this would help so y'all can see it too. And we'll come back probably in the next live and answer the questions. So what we're going to do today, we're going to read it together, and then we are going to give each other time to get the answers. If you want to follow along with us and you have a computer, you can go on the Apologetic Press, and it should be under the Bible lessons. I think it's Bible lessons.
I think so.
Yeah, I'd like to tell them exactly how to get to it, but I can't remember what you click on to get to it, do you?
Home studies, I believe. We'll write it down for the next
I mean, I could go over there and find it, but what do you think?
I think we'll tell them in the next one.
Well, either way, you can follow along with us, but if you do have a computer, just check around in the Apologetic Press for the Bible courses, and if you look through there, you'll find it in one of them. And we're doing the many faces and causes of unbelief, and this will be lesson 1. We have 10 lessons.
11.
11
Mm-hmm.
in the beginner.
Yes.
Okay, so we have 11 lessons in the beginner that we got to do. This is the first one. So we're going to read it together and get to talk about it a little bit, and then the next one will answer the question.
Yeah. Did you want to do it how we read it before?
What, each section?
Yeah.
Probably, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're going to read in sections. I'm going to let her read first, and then I will read the second section. So we're going to start off letting her read.
Okay. The many faces and causes of unbelief. Why do many obvious, intelligent people prefer to believe that there is no God? Humanity prides itself on its freedom of choice. Human beings are free moral agents who have been given the right to make their own decisions. Each person decides what he wants to wear, what he wants to eat, and where he wants to go. But most important, each person decides what he or she wants to believe. A speech given by the Old Testament character Joshua allows us to see just how free each one of us is to choose what we want to believe in.
If we want to believe in God.
Yeah, if we want to believe in God. Speaking to the Jewish nation thousands of years ago, Joshua said, "And if it seems evil to you to serve the Lord, choose for yourself this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." Joshua 24:15. Joshua's point could not have been clearer. The Jews, just like every other nation and all individual people, had the freedom to choose to believe or not to believe in God. Freedom, however, comes with responsibility. With freedom of choice comes the responsibility to think carefully, choose wisely, and act forcibly. Therefore, it is the responsibility of every human being to recognize, believe, and obey the truth.
Okay, faces of unbelief. Throughout history, many people have decided not to believe in God. They have gone by many different names: atheists, freethinkers, agnostics, infidels, etc. In this section, we will look at specific types of unbelievers.
Atheists. The word atheism means without God. The atheist is the person who says there is no God. The late Carl Sagan was one of the world's most famous atheists. He summed up atheism when he declared, "The cosmos is all that is or ever was or ever will be." An atheist who an atheist is one who plainly states that God does not exist. However, it is much easier for someone to call himself an atheist than it is for him to defend such a position. In order to know that there is no God, a person would have to know every single fact in the universe, because the one fact that he did not know might be the fact that God exists. For instance, if a person had a unique blue striped shirt, he could not prove that no other shirt in the world was like it unless he had seen every other shirt in the world. The atheist cannot prove that God does not exist because he cannot possibly know every other fact that there is to know, any more than a man with a blue striped shirt can see every other shirt that exists. The actual truth of the matter is that most atheists do not deal with facts at all. They they are so set against the idea of God that they dismiss or ignore the evidence that proves his existence. The late Isaac Emsvo, another famous atheist, once said, "Emotionally, I'm an atheist. I don't have the evidence to prove that God does not exist, but I am so strongly that suspect he doesn't that I don't want to waste my time." Atheism does not answer the evidence for God's existence and cannot offer a reasonable alternative for belief in him.
Agnostics. So the word agnostic means without knowledge. The agnostic does not boldly proclaim that God does not exist. Instead, he suggests no one can know whether or not God exists because there simply is not enough evidence upon which to base a conclusion. In essence, then, agnosticism says, I don't know, you don't know, nobody knows, and nobody can know if there is a God. Agnostics frequently point out that man cannot know everything, and that he never has been able to detect God with his limited mind and capabilities. Thus, the agnostic suggests people should quit searching. What the agnostic fails to realize, however, is that this concept must work both directions. That is to say, man must be unable to reach up to God, and God must be unable to reach down to man. But God is not unable to reach men, for he is not limited by the same constraints in time and knowledge as humans. As infinite, God could make himself known to us any time he wanted, and there is nothing to prevent him from doing so. Furthermore, there is good evidence that he has done exactly that. The agnostic's claim of "I can't know" really is a mask that he puts on to hide the fact that he realizes there is ample evidence that he can neither explain away nor disprove to establish the existence of God. Perhaps the agnostics cannot find God for the same reason a thief cannot find a policeman.
Skeptic. The skeptic is a person who doubts that there is a God. The standard dictionary definition is quite revealing when it describes a skeptic as one who holds to the doctrine that true knowledge or knowledge in a particular area is uncertain and who has doubts concerning basic religious principles. Notice that the skeptic does not claim knowledge of God is unattainable, as the agnostic does, but rather is uncertain. The skeptic is not prepared to accept anything except that which can be verified empirically, that is to say, by using the five senses. To the skeptic, then science becomes the only valid method of providing anything, since
Proving.
proving anything. Since God cannot be seen, tasted, heard, touched, or smelled, then skeptics say that either he does not exist or that he cannot be very important even if he does. However, the skeptic's position is faulty because even he knows some things exist that cannot be verified by the scientific method. Science will never be able to observe or explain such concepts as love, hate, sorrow, or joy. Science never will be able to explain why a man in a foxhole during a war throws himself on a hand grenade to save his fellow soldiers. The sad part is that the skeptic has paid a high price for his skepticism. The rejection and abandonment of some of the human race's most important and cherished concepts. Why? In order to able to say, I doubt that God exists?
An infidel. The infidel is a person who not only refuses to believe in God himself, but who also is intolerant of and actively opposes those who do. The infidel speaks out against God and does all he can to condemn religion. The infidel despises God and the Bible and anyone who believes in either.
Causes of unbelief. Up to this point, we have looked at different categories of people who do not believe in God. But why exactly do they refuse to believe in Him? For the rest of this lesson, we would like to examine some of the reasons for disbelief in God of the Bible.
Bias against God. There is little doubt that many people find belief in God difficult because there is in their mind a bias that sways them against it. This built in bias is what some have referred to as the prejudice of unbelief. Stanley Sayers put it like this: one of the significant and obvious reasons the unbeliever remains an unbeliever is that he likes it that way. In fact, any evidence of any source or to any degree fails to move him from his position if his heart is strongly bent against evidence and toward unbelief. At times, people suffer from extreme prejudice, especially when it comes to belief in God. They operate within a framework of bias against the God of the Bible. The Christian God is utterly repugnant to them because he represents a threat to man's own desires and ambitions. In other words, the will of man is on a collision course with the will of God. Such a course leads inevitably to a conflict of interest. Some people apparently would rather die in sin than live in obedience. Paul reminded the first century Christians in Rome of those who, knowing God, glorified him not as God, neither gave thanks, but became vain in their reasonings, and their senseless heart was darkened, and even as they refused to have God in their knowledge, God gave them up unto a reprobate mind. Romans chapter 1, verses 21-28. The problem about which the apostle wrote was not a failure to accept what was unknowable. The text in Romans clearly indicates that these were people who could and did know of the existence of God. Rather, it was a problem of refusing to accept what was knowable, God's reality. Those to whom Paul referred had such a built-in prejudice against God that they refused to have God in their knowledge. This situation then caused the apostle to write by inspiration of the Holy Spirit, that professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. Romans chapter 1, verses 22. In biblical usage, the term fool generally does not indicate an unintelligent person, and it certainly is not used here in such a fashion. Instead, the term carries both a moral and religious judgment, as it does in Romans chapter 1. This is why the psalmist, again by inspiration, wrote that the fool has said in his heart, "There is no God." 14:1. If the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, Psalms 111:10, then conversely, foolishness finds its origin in the rejection of God. Isaiah referred to a man as a fool whose mind plots iniquity to practice ungodliness. Isaiah chapter 32, verse 6. Bias against God, therefore, has become one of the chief causes of unbelief, which no doubt explains why the writer of the book of Hebrews warned, "Beware, brethren, lest there be any of you an evil heart of unbelief." Hebrews 3:12.
Influence of parents and upbringing. Surely one of the most powerful influences on any human being is parents. Generally speaking, mothers and fathers not only are the first influence in a child's life, but also are a continuing influence. It has been said that a child's mind is like jello, and that the parent's task is to put all the good stuff before it sets. The task of putting the right things into the mind of a child is difficult and requires much patience. It is a 24-hour full-time process that should take place continuously when sitting with a child, riding in a car, eating a meal together, and even while watching television. See Deuteronomy 6:6-7. Sometimes the education of a child is accomplished by instruction, which is why parents are encouraged to rear their children in the training and admonition of the Lord. Ephesians 6:4. Other times it is accomplished by discipline, as the Proverbs writer noted when he commented, "The rod of reproof gives wisdom, but a child left to himself brings shame to his mother." 29:15. On occasion, however, parents fail to teach their children to believe in God. Sometimes they even teach a child not to believe in God. If children see a parent who does not care about God or is skeptical of all evidence relating to God's existence, that child is likely to end up just as indifferent and skeptical as his or her parents. The spiritual condition of an entire nation has been affected adversely because of the failure of parents to instruct their children properly regarding the belief in God.
Education. Certainly one of the most important causes of unbelief is improper education. Proper education is a wonderful tool that can be used to build better communities and nations. But some types of education are bad not only for individuals but for societies as well. Any type of education that attempts to destroy belief in a divine creator God is a negative system that can lead only to ruin. As bad as it is, the kind of education now being offered in many public schools has the potential to destroy faith in God. One of the main tools used to destroy such a faith is the teaching of organic evolution. For several decades, evolution has been taught as a scientific fact in many elementary, junior high, and senior high schools, as well as in most colleges and universities. As a result, when textbooks and teachers present organic evolution as something all reputable scientists believe, many students believe in the theory without ever being exposed to the opposing evidence, which shows that creation by God is a much better explanation for the origin of the universe and its inhabitants. Acceptance of the naturalistic concept of evolution leads quite naturally to disbelief in God.
Morality. Many people will not believe in God because if they do, they will have to change the way they live. These people may be involved in sins such as homosexuality, greed, adultery, or any number of actions that are contrary to the laws of God. As soon as they admit that there is a God, then they also must admit that God wants them to do or not do certain things. They do not want a God who tells them what to do, so they simply choose to believe that there is no God. Psalm 1:4. 14:1 discusses this clearly. The fool has said in his heart, "There is no God." They are corrupt. They have done abominable works. One of the most common reasons people choose not to believe in God is because they do not want to give up their sinful lifestyles.
Scientific materialism. We are living in an era where science rules and where we observe its accomplishments every day. Science has been successful in doing wonderful things such as eradicating smallpox, putting men on the moon, preventing polio, and lengthening human lifespans. However, while we should be grateful for the strides that science has made, we likewise should acknowledge all that science owes to God in Genesis 1:28. God told man to subdue the earth and have dominion over it. I done hit it.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. Surely this statement by God is the cornerstone of charter of science. Yes, undoubtedly, one of the greatest obstacles to believe in God is the attitude that science somehow has made belief in God obsolete. Many scientists today claim that the only way to discover something is by empirical observation. If something cannot be observed by the five senses, then either it does not exist or is not important, of course. Since God cannot be observed by these five senses, to many scientists and others who have adopted such a view, he does not exist or is not very important, even if he does.
Intellectual peer pressure. It is not pleasant to be labeled as stupid, dumb, ignorant, or moronic. Yet, those labels have been applied to people who are willing to defend the existence of God and the biblical concept of creation. Thousands of highly intelligent people are scientists, and many of them believe in evolution. The idea being suggested is that all intelligent people believe in evolution. After all, how could so many smart people be wrong? However, the idea that truth is determined by popular opinion or majority vote is false. A thing may be, and often is, true even when accepted only by a small minority. In fact, scientific successes often have occurred because researchers rebelled against the majority opinion for the sake of truth. Just because millions of people believe something does not make it right. If something is true, stating it a million times does not make it any truer. And if it is false, stating it a million times does not make it any less false.
Evil, pain, and suffering. Another frequent cause of unbelief is the existence of evil, pain, and suffering in the world. If there is an all-powerful God and he is all good, then why do bad things happen to innocent victims, such as babies? Many have abandoned belief in God because of the presence of suffering in their lives or in the lives of those close to them. Some have lost children, others have uttered what they believe to be unanswered prayers, and still others have seen their best friends taken from them. Faced with these terrible tragedies, they have decided that God must not exist because if he did, then surely he would have done something to prevent such events. Here's a brief response to this problem. When God created everything, he said that it was very good, Genesis 1:31. However, the first man and woman, Adam and Eve, sinned against God and brought pain and suffering into the world. God always has given human beings the right to make their own decisions. He did not create humans as robots that have no choices. Much of the suffering that is present in the world today is a result of the misuse of the freedom of choice of both past generations and our own generation. Furthermore, there are times when suffering actually is beneficial. Think of the man whose chest begins to throb as he begins to have a heart attack, or the woman whose side starts to ache at the beginning of appendicitis. Pain often sends us to the doctor for prevention or cure. Also, pain and tragedy helps humans develop some of the most treasured traits in society: bravery, heroism, self-sacrifice, and numerous others. The fact that even Jesus, as the Son of God, was subjected to pain and suffering, Hebrews 5:8, 1 Peter 2:2, proves that God loves and cares for his creation. God could have abandoned us to our own sinful devices, but instead God demonstrated his own love towards us, and that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Romans chapter 5, verse 8.
Conclusion. All too often, man's wisdom has replaced God's. See 1 Corinthians 1:18-25. Causing many to lose their way in what has become one of the most horrible and yet one of the most common tragedies of our day. The price humans have paid for being intellectually learned but spiritually ignorant, the loss of their souls, has been far higher than we could have ever imagined. The Lord is happy to help those today who live in honest unbelief. He has provided ample evidence so they might believe. But what about those who refuse to believe in God in spite of the evidence? The Apostle John says, "But the cowardly, unbelieving, abominable, murderers, sexual immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death." Revelations 21:8.
So that's all of the reading. Do we want to read the questions? Or we'll probably just come back to the questions.
Yeah, we'll
come back to the questions and we'll go over them together in the next live. But I'm going to take a moment just to talk about a few things that we discussed here. When it was talking about the bias, about the unbelief of God, I was thinking of there could be a comparison there with how there is people biased against the God of the Bible versus denominational or gods they believe in. It's kind of the same thing. There's people that is biased against Jesus Christ's church, which is the church in the Bible. So with what we read there about the bias, I think that's a good example for people who are, say they believe in God, but they don't believe in the God of the Bible. They need to really look at what they're believing in, because they could be leaning biased toward the God of the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just something that came to my mind as we was reading. They may not even realize they're doing it, and you're being biased toward the God of the Bible and his church. So that's just as bad as not believing in a God at all.
Yeah,
when you're biased against God of the Bible and his church, you are an unbeliever. And about the classification as a fool, it don't mean you're ignorant or stupid or anything like that. It's more of you just don't really understand.
Yeah, I think that it's really important for people to know, if the church that you're going to lines up with the church of the New Testament.
Yeah, because we was reading a lesson the other day about how some churches will try to combine old laws and new laws and pick and choose the things they want to take and what they don't want to take. And many denominations will try to don't want to do the Church of Christ belief, because the doctrine of Christ, because of the marriage, remarriage, and divorce, and what it says in the New Testament.
Yeah.
About those subjects. So you can't pick and choose laws. I mean, we have one law. God gave the law. We may not like everything in the law, but it's not going to change the law.
Right. And even though, we have to obey, state and federal law, if it goes against what God wants, we have to go by God's law.
Yeah, we're to respect the laws of the land, but if it has us to violate God's law, we always choose to do what's right with God's law first over everything. If it costs us our life, we're supposed to choose to do what God's law says, and then we gain life. Actually, we don't lose life.
Yeah.
And you need, if you don't believe that, you need to work on it because that's what it's going to take. We heard a sermon yesterday about uh, how much are you willing to sacrifice? How much are you willing to give up?
Mm-hmm.
And the preacher gave a good example of what it costs to be a Christian. Jesus, he paid it all. He gave it all. And if you want it, you're going to have to sacrifice everything.
Yeah.
It's going to cost a price. It's going to be all you have. So that's all I've got with this lesson. I hope you guys have enjoyed it, and we'll come back in the next one and we'll answer the rest of the questions. We look forward to hearing from you. If you got any questions, leave in the comments and we'll be glad to answer. Hit that like, share, subscribe, and we will see you in the next live. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.